Yeah.
I probably never have.
There you go.
So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I think it's Wednesday.
Yes.
Definitely. Wednesday evening. Thank you so much. I see a few faces that came to some of the presentations, so that's great. We're glad that you are here to help us kind of vision library services for the village of Pinehurst. So just do brief introductions. My name is Sarah Roberts. I work for a company called Library IQ. So we get to go around and do these types of assessments and strategic planning for libraries all across the country. It's the most fun that you can have. We also operate libraries. So we have 84 locations that I am actually, my other job is the director of operations over those libraries. And so we're actively working in libraries every day and assessing them as well. So that gives us a really unique perspective. I think we're the only ones who do that. So that we really love libraries. So I have my colleague Debbie Joy. Let you introduce yourself, Debbie.
So I, like Sarah, I'm a recovering librarian, work in marketing and also do lots of consulting for public libraries. So thank you so much. We're very honored to be here and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, my name is Fred Belden. I work for an architecture firm out of Raleigh called Clearscapes, and we do a lot of work with community groups and public gathering spaces. So we're excited to hear what all of you are hoping and dreaming for your library so we can work with these fine ladies here to help understand.
Great. So I think first we'll go around the room and you guys can introduce yourselves and just kind of say what your tie to the library is, and then I'll give a more formal introduction to this, what we're doing tonight, what we're doing here. So if you don't mind starting over here.
Yeah, sure. My name is Kim Schmidt, and I'm a mom of 4. My kids range from age 7 to 15, and we're in the public school system, and we are fairly new to the community. We've lived here 18 months, and until living in Pinehurst, we've only lived in big cities. We love libraries. Our whole family, we're big readers, and then coming to a small town, one of the big shocking things was how different the libraries were, and so that's been an adjustment for us, and so I really wanted to be a part of this.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm Joanna Neighbors. I'm by trade an attorney, and I have an MBA from Chapel Hill. We've been here about 5 years. My husband is a little bit more local from the Virginia-Carolina border than I am. But libraries were a huge part of my education growing up. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and our library system was huge, and it was robust and well-supported, and from adolescence through high school, that was a big deal for me, and having a place to go and study and learn and collaborate was a big deal. I am also an expectant mother, so it's a big deal for my future family. We're concerned that exists. And right now, I think my primary concern are like the library hours. I commute an hour each way every day, and so I don't get home until about 5:30 or 6, and the library's closed, and so that leaves me about 3 hours on a Saturday to use it. Until this all came up, I didn't really even know we had a library here in Pinehurst. So, hopefully for the future.
I'm Bob Rydell. I've been here 16 years, and I've been retired 16 years. I've been in Brooklyn, New Jersey, Maryland, South Carolina, worked with companies internationally, and my job today, I play golf.
Grant Peeler, retired IBM engineer, retired since 2005, and I don't use the library, so needed someone to use it. But maybe you would. I doubt it. Well, no, they offer some things like movies or DVDs, or movies on CD or books on tape. I'd use those.
I'm Mike McKittrick, been here 7 years.
We do, my wife is more of a reader than I am, and she does the books. When we travel, we will go and get audiobooks, so we do that. And I do like the archives a lot.
Hi, I'm Kathy Lanning, and I'm a registered nurse, retired, and I've lived here 19 years. I have 4 children also, but in 3.5 years. I love libraries. I have always been involved in libraries. In fact, when we lived in Melbourne Beach, they built a library right in the middle of the town, which was very convenient for the permanent residents there because there was probably only 50% of the people that were permanent residents. And I read all the time, and I go to the library at least once a week, if not twice a week. So, and I love this library.
Very good.
Grant, is it possible that Dora is your wife?
It's possible.
He didn't mention, this is good for you too, that his wife plays pickleball.
Oh, yes.
And with the new building where they have, a brick building, they have 2 pickleball courts out there. You might try that. You'll find it a lot easier on your psyche than playing golf. My name is Clark Rosette, and I suspect that from looking around this theater that probably most everybody's been here less time than I have. I've only been in Pinehurst since 2000 or 2001, but I came here originally in '92. I have used the library ever since I came here. Between my wife and myself, we probably average 2 trips, at least 2 trips a week to the library. However, if you want any reference books, forget it. I go out to the library at the college when I want something a little different that doesn't mean just this little rinky-dink little library that we have here.
Okay.
I'm Karen Haywood. I've lived here since May. I'm originally from Durham, and I moved here from Greensboro. So everyone says I'm local from North Carolina. I retired from the UNC system, and I have a copy editing job. I also have written 7 books for children, nonfiction reference books for kids, which I learned a lot doing that. And I use this library, and I still use the one in Greensboro. I don't tell them I moved. I download books to my Kindle, and I use that. Given also has that option, which is nice.
Great.
Dan Tejas. I've lived here about 2.5, 3 years. I'm an avid reader. I grew up in a library. I have 2 little girls. One of them is an avid, one is an avid reader, one's aspiring. So I'm kind of pushing that myself, so it's aspirational for me too. We go to Southern Pines Library for the most part, which is, I'd like for us to have something similar to that. So we don't, honestly, just like logistics, we don't have to travel as far. And just for the village and a community place. And I know during the summer, the programming for the girls at the library is phenomenal. The selection of books is not. And having a little bit more community-driven projects there, I think would be really good for all of us.
I'm Rebecca Pugh. I've been here in Moore County for 14 years. I've been a teacher here. I've taught middle school level, and I currently teach at college. And I'm an avid reader. I'm an English teacher, I might have said. And I mostly use the college library as well. I volunteer in the library. I'm considering getting an MLS degree. I'm very interested in libraries. And I have 2 little girls as well. They're both at Pinehurst Elementary, and can't yet read yet, but they love to be read too.
Okay. Great.
I'm Winston Pound. I'm 17. I've been here since I was 1, so I think 2003.
Wow.
And we use the library, I would say, probably once every 2 weeks. And so my younger brother, we're both homeschooled, so we can go there for books for that purpose, or my mom can send us there for certain books that she wants us to read for maybe a school project or do an essay on. And what else? I think our library selection isn't the best. I think that could be improved. And also, I think the community there is pretty great. I like being able to run into people and like, oh, I know you from this, or it's that nature. But.
Great.
What grade are you in?
I'm a junior.
Excellent. A nice, diverse group. I like it. So we're going to talk about a few things first, as I mentioned. And we are taking an audio recording of this, just to let you know. So that's why we're not like scribbling down notes, which is helpful. So you guys have a very unique library, and that it is privately funded. I have worked in a lot of libraries and been to a lot of libraries and have never seen this setup. So I'm learning a lot about this setup and what you guys use and what you have. But because it's privately funded, as of course sometimes funding runs out, and so that's partly why we're here. We're here to talk about what happens then, what happens next, what you want in a public library. And we're here because I believe a couple of years ago this started, and there was a library working group that assessed and came up with some plans, and now the village council wants to know what you as community members want. So we've done several of these conversations. We've had 2 public presentations, which I think a few of you were there, where we talked about innovative library services and then got some feedback there. There is a survey up now that we're going to ask you to fill out as well. So we're taking in a lot of information. So we're not here to present, to give you options, to talk about what it costs, what it could be. We don't want, to lead you in that direction. We really want to know, what is the need? How can we fill it? Is a public library, do you want that? Where do you want that? What could it look like? What would the services be? So those are some of the questions that we're going to talk about tonight. Any questions just about the process or anything like that?
Are you going to ask us what we would like the people to do with the present library?
Yes, that will definitely be a topic of conversation.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have like a timeline of execution? Like how long do you think this process, and then any effects from the process?
We can talk about our timeline. So
Okay.
the timeline for this project is tomorrow we'll wrap up our on-site work. In the months of March and April, we'll synthesize and collate and think about all of this information that we've gathered. We'll come up with a report and some draft recommendations. Then we're going to test those draft recommendations using a mailed survey. It'll be mailed to random sampling of 400 residents. We're going to get those results back. We're going to, see if we were on the right track or not. And then we will develop and present a final report in June.
Okay, you're saying 400 residents, are they all members of the present library?
No, it will be 400 random Pinehurst residents.
Oh, that doesn't seem that's sort of fair. It should be people who are presently using the library.
Well, we really want to get a very clear understanding, and one important thing to know tonight is we have done a very deep dive, and we're doing a very deep dive into both people who use the library and care about the library, and people who don't use the library so much. So the voices of the people who use the library, we are hearing loud and clear. We're having 4 meetings just like this one. We have an online survey at engage@vopnc.org/library. And so we encourage you and all your friends, please go online and fill out that survey. So we really are giving a voice to everybody who wants one. Is that helpful?
Not really, but if that's the way you're doing it,
All right.
we don't have anything to say about it, really.
Well, tonight is your moment, and so just let it all out. We really want to hear what you think.
Okay. I would like the library to stay where it is and to renovate that whole building and put the archives somewhere else. I think if you renovated that library, you would have lots of room for a whole children's section, which definitely needs to be expanded. So that's my...
Okay, and Kathleen?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we think of that?
Yeah.
Well, I'll say it's at least a cost-effective option, right?
Yeah.
So a little history for you all, that don't know, there was, I think, some controversy associated with the community center. And again, I grew up with the community center, so I was kind of like, what's the big deal? But it was not on the priority list when the village was surveyed, and it was made a priority, and it happened. And I think the flash to bang on that was pretty quick. I mean,
Yes.
right, the decision was made, and now it's up. And there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of resident input that was listened to, I think, on that. And so it was a costly option. There's generally a surplus in the village fund, and I don't know if taxpayer dollars will be diverted into this. I'm perfectly comfortable with a taxpayer-supported library. And, you know, I'm used to taxpayer-supported, supplemented by a private foundation. So, again, those are all things I'm comfortable with. But cost-effective is always, I think, a great option when they exist.
Or a priority.
Right, and if there's a need to expand, and that's, I'm glad we have an architect here, you know, room to add on or extend, I think that's great, but I know it's got a lot of character, I know it's a beautiful building, and it's historic, and there aren't a whole lot of those that have survived some fires around here, and so I think if that's an option, that's a great option. So, thank you. You're welcome.
It's a great location, too.
And what's the utility of the archive as well? Like, how many people go in there and actually explore the archive and utilize it as opposed to what would this space be used for, a library? So,
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. Do you know that?
I was wondering if that Tufts archive has to be in that building. Is there some sort
No,
of,
why would it have to be?
that's my question.
Yeah.
Is that rather than private giving that's associated?
Yeah.
Like there may be an endowment associated with that?
That's what I was
Other than that?
So I would just push back on that a little bit, that I think that now in Moore County, again, I'm a new resident, but I meet a lot of people like me who are moving to Moore County, moving to Pinehurst, having experienced much bigger communities. So the size of the current Gibbon Library, I could envision Pinehurst utilizing something much larger in a new modern building.
Okay, and Mike, with the mic.
There's some background information that I think that we really need. I had talked to somebody today and I said, how much money do you get if you become a state library? What do you get as far as assistance? Number came back as $8,000. How many libraries are there in Moore County?
Was there five and a bookmobile?
Five.
Everything's considered a building.
So, 5 in bookmobile. Okay. So we really don't know what you think you want. We don't know if you really, you know, state supported means really what? If it's $8,000, you know, is that really going to get you fixed? Where are the other libraries? Has there been any work between the 3 communities that are here? Do we really need to have a library in each one of these towns? Would people be satisfied with a large library that would service all of the 3 areas? Would that serve? When I went through this thing this morning, there were some space things that came up, which is if you want some place where people can go and meet, and you can interact, and you have quiet sections, and you have interactive sections and stuff like that. When you begin to lay out what you would like to have, then you kind of back into, to me, what size of this thing do you need? And without that, you're kind of guessing at, oh yeah, the current building will work fine. And really it may not until you delve into what you want to get out of it. But I don't see how small towns, because this is not a big place, how they each can have their own. It just seems to me to be kind of, you know, I like the one we got, I like the archives, I like all that stuff, but I mean, is there anything in putting stuff together so that all 3 can benefit or something like that? And I can't answer that question, but I do think you have to go through, what do you want this thing not to physically look like, what you want to be able to do? And I'll do one other point. On that survey today, it said that you had retail space in a coffee shop, right? Well, it so happens we already have that, and it's down the street. So to use that as a point, it's not necessarily in the same building where you have the library. Is that good or bad? I don't know. But some of this stuff could be used in various things you've already got to achieve the goal of giving the services that the people want.
Great. And I think you said exactly what we're here to do, which is to listen and find out what you want the space to be. So yes, we can't say what it should be. We just want to know what services would you use in a public library. So do any come to mind, especially those that have used other public libraries? What services would you want to see in your library?
I will go to a library over any other if the library has an interlibrary loan system.
Okay, yes.
Oh, what?
An
An interlibrary loan
Okay.
system, so that the selection is not limited to purely what is housed in the building. So currently, I take my children to the Moore County Library in Carthage, which really is not convenient for me at all. And because of the hours, we can only go on Saturday morning. But we go there, not because we love the building, not because they have an enormous selection. We go there because they have interlibrary loan.
What does that mean?
So that means that they're part of a system of libraries. And so if we want a book that's not housed in that building, we can still reserve it, and they would get it from another Moore County library facility.
Does it have to
But
be-
actually, they're part of a 5-county system, so they can pull books from 5 counties.
So you just go.
Does it have to go back to the same library?
I
The
don't,
books are gonna end up in one spot?
Usually,
it's a little nebulous, maybe.
Yeah.
A little nebulous.
So in my experience with interlibrary loan, you pick up the book from your local library, wherever you ordered it to, you take it back there, and they'll ship it back.
So
And so they
someone has
handle all of the
to
copies.
coordinate and pay for
Right.
all of that shipping and
Right.
stuff.
Right, is that why we're considering this as a private library though? Because we're talking about
Actually-
public libraries, can you arrange for that?
You can. That's a little library factoid. So interlibrary loan is typically a statewide function. And so a library, if it's in a county system like Moore County, or if it's operated by a municipality like Southern Pines, each one can access interlibrary loan. And I think Audrey is in the process of trying to get that set up here in Pinehurst.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So,
Last night, we had put stickies on the wall. My interlibrary loan sticky got several hearts on it. A lot of people want that. My other one was online renewal. I want to renew my book online. That's not an option now, as far as I know.
well, all you have to do is call, and they'll renew
Some
it
of us don't like to
immediately.
talk on the phone. Some of us don't
But
like
the
to do
people
it
there are
when it's not
very,
convenient, you know, like
very
every night.
receptive to phone calls, and very good about renewing your books,
Right.
and very pleasant. So, I don't,
What are their hours? I think of things like this, you know, when it's not convenient.
Right, so online renewal.
Well, and you bring up something about hours.
Yeah.
Hours too, because, so if you're not working during the day or you're not in school during the day, it's awesome if the library's open from 9 to 5. But, you know, there's definitely a lot, there's a lot of people in Pinehurst that just doesn't work for us at
but
all.
you just don't need a new library to have longer hours.
Not necessarily.
You can have longer hours with a renovated library.
Definitely,
Or
but
do
it
you
might
want to sit
mean a different mindset to the library, because that also talks about staffing our volunteers and so on, so it's a different mindset of when is this library gonna be available to people?
Did you have something?
I've been here 16 years, and in the past, I've enjoyed libraries, and I've also found them to be very good to get reference material. But as I've gotten older and I guess things have moved on, when I need to find a fact, I don't go to the library for a reference book. I go online.
You go online, right?
And I think most of us are that way, or at least I feel it's that way. And when I look at the library here in Pinehurst, is it a library or is it a museum? And if it's a museum, to me, it seems to be very narrowly focused. But it takes up a lot of space. It wants more space. Well, in that building and in the area that it's in, it's not going to expand so easy. So I'm coming from a point of, I had a need for libraries for reference. The library didn't have it. I went online, and I'm happy there. As far as reading for enjoyment, I probably go through 20 or 30 books a year. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, it works for me. I think if anything has to happen with our library here, or library museum, we really have to figure out as a community, do we want a library or do we want a museum? I, for one, I would take the museum and put it back where people will go there. Pinehurst Resorts Hotel,
That's what, exactly.
where people come in, they don't know the history. I've been through the Tufts Museum once, and I bring people from as far away as Canada or California, and I take them through once. It's not a living, vibrant museum to my liking.
You brings up a good point in that, like, we've kind of lost the need for reference books and whatnot, and a more driven toward the community events, which is what I know what my wife and my kids really enjoy about the library, going there, especially during the summer when they have time. Integrating it more into the community, not just making it a resource for checking out books occasionally, but making it a resource for the community.
So would you guys want to expand a little bit on what that looks like? So for some of us who think of a library as a place where we check out a book or we ask a reference question, for some of you who have experienced other libraries, maybe talk a little bit about different programs that you've attended that you think are really useful, just to help us maybe think about library in a different way.
I think one thing that my family especially would really enjoy would be like an early literacy advocacy program, story times, and it's more than just let's read some stories, but like let's sing some songs and let's play these little games, that sort of thing. And they may have some that I've been to story time, but it's been a few years since I've taken them to that particular one. Southern Pines does in my opinion, a much better job than Pinehurst.
When you were talking about online reference, you and I were talking about two different things. I'm saying within the past 2 years, I've gone out to the Sand Hills Library because I was tweaked I wanted to reread Churchill's books on the Second World War. You can't look that up. You can look that up, I suppose, online, but that's 5 volumes, and they each one about that thick. Then I thought, something also caught my interest, and I wanted to read more about Lee's lieutenants. You can get some of the information, facts online, but you can't get the book. We don't have any books like that in our library. I feel that, now, how many books do we have? You have a number. I've read it online.
Just lie.
It makes a
How many
difference.
books are in the collection?
17,000.
Okay, how many do they have over in Southern Pines? 42,000?
Eric, what?
I said 29, but that was several years ago, so
29,000.
I doubt they're at 42 since then, but it's probably.
But I agree with you. If there is something that you can't find online, reference-wise, you've got Southern Pines and you've got Owens. And do we need to duplicate something
That's already there.
10 minutes away?
Some of the ways that I think of the library being a resource beyond something, a place where you check out a book, is as a community space that can be used for a lot of different things. Ways that I've used libraries personally, libraries that have tables, workspace, comfortable chairs. It's just a place where, if you don't want to do your work at the office, you gotta get out of your house. It's another place to go and do a project or it could even be a collaborative project if there's group work rooms or places that you can work at the library that aren't quiet spaces. That's kind of a new thing that we started to see at some of the libraries we loved, where it's not all just a quiet thing, where there can be group meetings and so on, and parts of the library that are for quiet study and parts that aren't. I know a lot of teenagers, when we were in Charlotte, a lot of teens like to go and do their library, or do their homework at the library. That means a library that's open later into the evening, of course, because that's when the teens are doing their homework. But that was a great place to do that, as well as a place where kids can meet a tutor and get their tutoring accomplished. Somewhere that's not in the busyness of the home, it's not at the school. It's another place to do that.
It's also a safe public space for kids to meet other people, right?
Yeah.
And so my hometown library was open until 9:30. I just looked it up today because I was curious. And I remember through high school in particular, that being kind of one of the places where you would go. You might get a study room so you can talk and not disturb other people. But, you know, again, more collaborative, a place that I was the younger of two, but I know, you know, when my brother was older, he would go and do SAT prep and things like that, so he just wouldn't be disturbed for a block of time. There are things like that that I think you get out of a library that you're connected to. And again, I'm not a mom yet, but I wouldn't want my kid to have to drive all the way to Southern Pines at 9 o'clock at night to have to do that when we do potentially have that facility available here. And so I think that collaborative space is really important. The other thing I think I would like to see, so throughout my 2 years of education, I've had access to various collegiate libraries, and the access to journal articles is great because you have that. And so if they do have an online space or through membership that you can access journals, I think that's another way. I think that's a reference.
Like
to
database subscriptions the
Right.
library has, and then it's a public
that is a public resource if you're a member, because you can't get a journal article online without paying for it basically anymore. And so whether you're, you know, keeping up on medical stuff, or there's just a million things out there that are really journal articles, I'll read that kind of thing now. And so I think that would be a really cool resource.
Does anybody have the information on how many square feet our present library is if you included the whole building?
I think we're at about, we said about 3,500 now. I don't know how many square feet that are in total.
And you know, now that they have that new community center, I don't know if they have rooms where kids can go and do homework.
They have like an auxiliary room that you can go, but it's not suitable for you. It has no table, has nothing. So you have to set up a whole environment to support something like that. So.
And I mean, if you're going to go and do I have no idea what they give kids for high school homework anymore, but I mean, if you had a research project and you were doing it with other people, I would imagine it would be useful to have all of those things at your disposal. You know, and I think basics anymore, right? Connect to Wi-Fi while you're in there, things like that. I mean, that's all got to be, you know, photocopiers. I know almost no one uses them anymore, but printers, photocopiers.
Convenient outlets.
Right. I mean, and obviously, you know, I mean, when I was a kid, we paid for photocopies, but still, you know, you get a little copy card, you put it in the machine, you can make copies of your research, take them home, work on it, that sort of thing. I mean,
And the library does have super programs in the summer for kids, because I've volunteered on some of them, and I don't know why every child wouldn't take advantage of it, but
I do like the idea of having the library in the building it's already in. I do really like that. I like being able to be in the village and being around other people. Like, I mean, you're in walking distance of like Camelot, Rassy Wicker, possibly. So there's different areas where I can hang out with other people, and you're all in walking distance of that the village. And if the library was like really close to that center, like, I mean, it could be kind of like by where the hotel is or somewhere off there, it'd be okay. But I really like it just being in the center area because I feel like there's so much through traffic, there's so much like, and especially if there's a new like remodel, I feel like it would draw a lot of people there more so than it just being like, I don't know if I want to drive from there to go to the library rather than just being like, oh, I can go to the library and get a book. That's nice. You know, it'd be more convenient and actually more like appeasing for me. Like, oh, it's right here. There's this book I've been thinking about. I want to see if they have it. And I think it would be a good idea if we had that inner, what is it called?
Yeah, I think you make a great point where it is now. It seems like a lot of you are very satisfied with it being downtown as far as the space that it's in. I think that's still up for debate. I wanted to circle back a little bit to what Bob was saying and kind of the traditional using the library for reference services. And that's a little bit about what we present on innovation and thinking differently and what would be best for the whole community. So we've talked a lot about the community's changing a little bit, more families are moving in here, and would you agree with that statement that more and more families are here? And so what would be best for them? How can we create a great town for them as well? So
I have a question because I don't know this answer. Do the schools not have libraries anymore?
Libraries.
Huh?
they can use them during school hours,
That's
yes,
what I'm
those
saying.
individuals.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So are there any other services that you can think of that you would use or you would like to see in the library? Definitely, we have to have this.
It sounds like the group was talking about different kinds of spaces. So we were talking about more vibrant spaces where people can get together, like a book club or something like that, quiet study spaces. Winston talked about how really likes having the library in the center of town, in the village. But it's okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the same building as long as it stays sort of centrally located.
But where would you put it?
So
Get
what
next
is
to the
this?
community center? Could you get next to the community center?
And then, so one idea would be next to the community center.
That
What
way
is-
you've got access to their space as far as making rooms and stuff.
Gotcha.
The question is that, is the library for Pinehurst or is it for the surrounding communities? Because I don't know how many kids are in Pinehurst and
What? No.
in Pinehurst.
And
lot.
Pinehurst is in Pinehurst,
No.
and we
Pinehurst
have
not
lots
part
of
of
kids there.
Well, Pinehurst is building an 800-student elementary school.
Right.
So that gives you an idea.
And it's probably already going to be maxed out when they,
Yeah.
when they
Yes.
And that's Pinehurst residents only, they don't come from West
That's
End or
only
No.
kids who live technically in Pinehurst.
And in fact, it's less than that because they do
Is
additional.
Pinecrest the same way? Or is that,
Pinecrest is multi-city.
so high schools?
Right, high school's a little bit broader.
You know, you guys, if it weren't, the elephant in the room that I haven't heard anybody speak about is Pinehurst, what is it, designation as a national historical such and such. If you touch that building where the given is right now, you will probably to replace a brick, the archives or whoever them would have a hissy fit. And once the village has to decide what they're going to do about whether they care that much about the designation.
It's the archives doesn't have the hissy fit, it's the people
Sir?
who get, it's not that the archives have the hissy fit.
No, I don't mean.
It's
I don't
whether
mean
the state,
No.
whether you get the accreditation.
No,
or
no,
not.
That's the people that
You don't
think that
misunderstand what I'm
Pinehurst
saying.
gets-
I'm talking about whoever is the National Park Service.
Yeah.
They have the hissy.
They have, it's not the state.
They don't have this,
Probably
they're just gonna take
we're
away,
talking about-
they're gonna take away the accredit, and the
They
people
have-
around here
So-
doesn't think that's God. That's all.
They had a hissy,
So guys,
they had a hissy fit when the roast office wanted to build that little patio out there.
Out front.
Oh my God, you would have thought the.
No, is that external modification or is that internal modification? Because what we were talking about, we're
External.
talking
We're
about
talking about not doing
the
external.
inside. So if we leave the outside alone, because there's no need to add more to it. Take the archive out and replace that with more space for your library. You're not modifying the exterior, you're not.
I understand that, but that would be, using the archive space would be just a Band-Aid.
I was just wondering, wasn't it mainly just, was it that they were afraid of like getting rid of the, like messing with the inside, or I thought it was just if we moved onto the green more so?
so that's,
The outside.
so really the purpose of tonight is to find out what this group thinks. So really the question might be, maybe, does this group, how important is the designation of being a historical landmark to this group? So we might say, yeah, that's really important to me that that building maintain its status. Or some of us might say, it doesn't matter. What does this group think about that?
But you're talking two things here. One is, we're not talking about doing anything to the external part of the building.
I am.
Well, you are, but I think
So-
some of us aren't.
Okay, so
We're talking
even if,
about, there's rooms upon rooms in that building that aren't used for books. They're like sitting rooms.
gotcha, okay,
So-
thank you. But let's pretend, like, we're just sort of talking and spitballing. Let's pretend that we were gonna touch a brick. Does that matter to this group? How do we feel about that?
To me,
Doesn't mean a lot to me.
either.
What is the positive impact of it being designated?
Yeah,
that?
we don't know
Like, would
that,
it- I mean, is it good, like, is it have an impact on property values?
I just get to
I don't
know.
know. That's a good question.
I don't know, so.
I
You
think
run the
there-
risk of, I've been quiet because we can go down a slippery slope here
Yeah.
really quick. And from my perspective, I'm gonna give you a little bit of factual information on that, but in general, I'd like everyone to remember, our goal is to understand what your goals are for programming the library. Once we understand that, we're gonna have some sense of what the appropriate scale of the library might be, and it may work in that building, it may not work in that building. The question of the historic designation may or may not matter at the end of the day. So I would encourage you not to get caught up with you in that. Not that it's not important. Full disclosure, I'm past chair of Preservation North Carolina, so historic significance is important to me. And that's coming from me saying, don't worry about it yet. The first goal is to understand what the goals are for the library, and let us assess that as part of the factual information about it. But for those that are curious, you are a national register district, which is all carrot, no stick. Basically, if you're a certified historic property or contributing property within the district, as long as you are a district, you can garner tax credits for renovations to your property. But there is no regulatory environment that prevents you from modifying that building. If you modify that building or change enough of the registered district that the Park Service feels that you've inalterably affected the character, then they could remove that designation.
And then
All
you
of
lose the
that's
tax
a big-
credit. And then that's a tax credit effect?
You would lose the ability to garner tax credits for future renovations. should that
My understanding is that those tax credits have been long used.
A slippery slope, it's a 5-year recovery period. So once,
What's
if
going
you've
on?
done your tax credit, if you have occupied the building for 5 years beyond when you claim the credit, you're good. If something happens within that 5-year period, then there can be a clawback. But again, it's coming from someone, I do a ton of tax credit work. Don't get caught up in this yet. The bigger, most important question is, what are we trying to accomplish? What are you trying to accomplish as a
So
within library?
I'll to maybe get us back on track. This is the bottom line for me. If it's not open later during the week and extended weekend hours, and there's not interlibrary loan, my likelihood of ever using the library is slim, and so you can stay in the space you're in. I mean, I think that's just what it comes down to. I think a lot, I work, right? And so I leave Pinehurst at 6 in the morning and I get home at around 6 at night. And so if it's outside of those hours and I only get a couple hours on a weekend, I'm likely to go either to another town or just not bother. And we are a fairly fortunate town, and so using Amazon to just buy a book is often the option for folks here. I would like it not to be, and I would like my kids to grow up in a library the way I grew up in a library. I think that's an important skill, and I think there's a lot of socialization that goes on there. I think one of the most important things that goes on in libraries is that intergenerational interaction that doesn't necessarily happen in their school libraries. It doesn't happen in schools generally. They get that interaction with their community. They see, the old and the young doing the same things, and I think that's really cool. And so I would like to see a space that draws the community in, but not all of us are available between 9:30 and
So if we
5.
had longer hours in the present library, that would work.
I think it would be helpful.
Or potentially different hours, maybe
Yeah,
not even
different
longer,
hours, right,
just
okay.
make it more available to, with families being here, you were gonna have to skew it away from the 9 to 5, I think, to make it a viable
Okay.
space.
So,
I agree.
it sounds like.
I vote to double the size of the library where it is and expand the hours.
Done, goodbye.
Thank you.
All right.
Second.
To your point and to your point, you talked about creating a space where multiple people from different paths of life cross paths. And I know, Winston, you had talked about liking that location in particular. Someone else had mentioned the only other location I've heard so far is maybe next to the community center. So in your experience or in your mind, are those two areas equivalent or different? And
I
if
would
so,
say
can
that
you
nearly is
share
equivalent.
why?
I feel like that the village has like a special like sense to it. So like if you go down all these major highways, you're not going to hit it. Like you have to physically want to go there to be there, and it's a special environment where everything's like neat, everything's clean, it's like its own special environment, and it just feels nice. It's refreshing to be there, and so I feel like it could use, let's say, like an upgrade or something of that nature. But it, like being right next to that big highway, it gets you off that feeling like, oh, this is like a community thing. Like you're right next to a gas station, and you're like, you know, it's just, it doesn't look the same as maybe if that area eventually gets fixed up to be more like it gets expanded and, you know, bigger people take over and it makes it look better. I'm just saying that I feel like just being in that area, I don't think you'd get nearly as much through traffic, and I don't think, like there's some people I think that just go by there and like, oh, I'm here. This, like, I might want to get something here or go in and see if I can find someone I've been looking for or something like that.
The rest of the group have any thoughts on that?
So you don't like by the,
I mean, I'll go by there, but it's not necessarily like, I go by there, it's not like necessarily like.
I do too.
Right, let's say it's like, no one's going there unless they're going to the neighborhood right past it on Rattlesnake.
how many books would somebody have to have? How many books would you, to make it so that it's something that functions, maybe reference books aren't in there, maybe that you get online, but, you know, to be a, you know, there may not be benchmarks for this stuff, but to be a pretty good functioning library. And you do want to do books as opposed to digital, I guess. So what do you talk about? What's the size? What's the number?
It's kind of predicated off if you have loans or not, because once we have interlibrary loans, the overall size of the library doesn't need to be as large, because you can still get books.
Right. So let's take a pause and think about that for a minute. So we're talking still about the library as a place to check out books, right? And that's an important core service. So I think Mike was saying, well, how many books per capita is the standard? So there.
Well, I heard someone say that it's not very good. The reference, maybe not the reference, the books, it's not big enough was what I thought I heard was in general a complaint about the one you have. It's cute, it's great, you know, it's comfortable, it's got a great location, but it needs more stuff.
More space, and that's, so we call that.
Just, it's got to have more books in it, or am I is it? I mean,
Selection
I'm just trying to.
The selection is lacking. It is a smaller library. I mean, it's representative of the community. We're a smaller community.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the selection is like, but if you add the ability to get books from other libraries.
So that's why I wanted this group to pause for a second. So the collection is not big enough right now to meet the needs of the community, we think. That might be one thing that we might be hearing. So when someone
But
comes,
if you had the extra space within that building, you could add a lot more books. Because there's a back room, I'm assuming you've been there, there's no books in there. And then you would have the whole archives to renovate and put books in there.
understood. So what Kathleen is saying is the collection is not big enough, but if we move the archives out, we could add more space for collection. So that message is received and understood. So, but right now we feel like the collection is not big enough to meet the needs of the community. We've talked about nonfiction or reference. We've talked about fiction. You know, it's a community that likes to read a lot. We need a lot of bestsellers. We need to be cycling that stuff through and make them available. Interlibrary loan is a really good and important service, but there's a lag time. Mm-hmm. So that means that I'm going to go to the library and I'm going to say, what I really want is that book by Churchill and I want volume 2. I can get it, but it's going to take a few days just because, you know, physics. So we just want to make sure, or I shouldn't say what we want to do, but what many communities find is that they want to have those materials available right now. So when our kids come in and are browsing, or when Winston has a paper due tomorrow, like he's got to get that sucker done.
Sure, playing better.
Winston.
Thank you very much.
So does that answer your question about collection?
Not really, because you're putting your feelings in it.
Well, yeah, but it still has size to it.
She makes a valid point. My question is this, right? So this is privately funded, and you guys determined that it's not big enough. So we're going to increase it by 50%. I mean, what's the guarantee that you guys do a bunch of work, we have a phenomenal library, and then we can no longer fund it because it's grown past what we could actually pay for?
Right.
So are you factoring that? You're smart enough to factor that in.
I
but
have an
you-
idea about that.
Okay.
So if either a renovated library or a new library is done in such a way that meets needs that people might not even realize they have yet, and people love the library,
They'll contribute.
people are going to support, and the community will find ways to support the library. And I think, I really think that Pinehurst needs to think beyond it's a place to check out a book, or we need to have enough books and interlibrary loan. If it is a community space where people want to go and read a book, and they want to sit in a well-lit room with windows, and they want to sit there in a comfortable chair or a couch and read their book. They want to go there and get their studying done. The people who work, off-site want to go and just do their office work there. If it's a place that people really can believe in and have this shared space for multi-purposes, like many purposes, then it's going to be supported financially. There's going to be, people will find a way. The community is going to.
You're an optimistic person.
Well, but I just want to say.
That's good though. It's a good thing.
I'm saying that because I think we are thinking a little small, we're thinking of just a few little categories of what the library could mean.
Okay, I have a question. How many people here have supported the library presently? Like every year they have a fundraiser, not a fundraiser, but they ask for support. How many people here?
I have.
You do every year?
Yep.
Okay.
But not every.
So that's what I'm saying. How come everybody doesn't support it?
Well, because here, I'll give you an answer. Because right now, that library doesn't work at all for my family. And so that's why we wouldn't give money to it right now.
I see what she's talking about, as far as making the community center, is another case that is a win-win kind of thing, because as long as I've been here, the good burgers of Pinehurst have hollered and screamed and kicked their feet about needing foot traffic. They're not getting enough foot traffic into their, except for the people that are staying at the hotel. If we made the library that kind of a place that was a kind of a community congregational place,
They would have more.
you would have more foot traffic, the burgers would be happy, the library people would be happy,
With expanded hours
Kathy and I'd be happy.
Thank you.
and Sundays.
I
Yeah,
think-
we'll just also, sorry. Go ahead. To expand on what she was saying, like the Southern Pines Library, I know a lot of us probably have memberships there. We don't live in Southern Pines, and so we have to pay a membership fee. But because it is it's the best library we have in Moore County, as far as what they offer for programming, what they offer, like their selection of books, maybe minus the college, which does have a lot more nonfiction and whatnot. But, we're willing to give that money for those memberships because that is, something that we find valuable. And so I think if the library did have more materials and the kind of things she was looking for, you could offer memberships to other people who aren't Pinehurst residents and get some support in that way. I was just in there with my girls a couple of weeks ago, and I'm really passionate about young adult fiction, and so I was kind of perusing the selection while my kids were looking at books, and I just noticed, we're lacking a lot of key titles that I would expect to see in that section. It's just very small, and so you were asking about, do we have enough selection? Do we need to expand the selection? And I would give a hearty yes to that, especially the young adult and juvenile fiction.
What is the group was talking a second ago about that private funding model that Sarah was talking about a second ago. What about a library that's funded by the municipality? What do we think about that?
So that's the model I grew up with, and
Most
it
of us.
functions really well, right? I mean, you've got a municipality that meets the budget, and then the private foundation supplements that. And so, you know, the better your contributions, the better your programming, but the basic needs of the library are met by the municipality. You know, we are all Pinehurst residents, we all pay a little bit of extra tax because of that. And so, you know, there are times when you want to make sure the village is meeting our needs with that and not just picking their own projects like they have in the past. So, you know, if that was a sustainable model, I think my husband might not be, because he came from rural Virginia where this wasn't a thing for him, but I came from, you know, in Illinois. My brother's still there, and he pays $1,000 a month in property taxes, and I think he's crazy. So, you know, there's a happy medium somewhere in between.
If you can show that it benefits the community, I don't think people are going to mind paying.
Right.
But as it sits now, it doesn't, so a lot of people don't.
Yes.
What's the current budget and what's the current amount that the village gives now?
120.
Village gives 100,000.
120.
120?
100.
What's,
150.
they give 150 and what's the current?
It's
what's the-
25% of their total budget.
25%.
It's 25% of their total.
So it's a half a million. Three, 600,000.
600.
So 600,000, so they're covering 450 by private donations to keep the doors open. I mean, that's seemingly what's going on right now.
Logistics, right.
Yeah. Okay, just lay the information out.
And if you don't live in Southern Pines and you want a membership,
You pay
they
$100.
pay,
I
excuse
think
me,
it's $100.
64.
64?
I just read it on my card.
I put my friend told me 100.
Inflation.
I know, I'm telling you. When I was a boy.
You can get a Sam's Club. But that's the thing, that's $64 you wouldn't have to spend.
Yes.
That would be, you know, here in the community, and I'm sure you'd happily pay twice that in property taxes, right? It would be spread over the year.
Do you pay to use a community college library?
No,
It's free.
no,
because
it's
we
free.
all are part of that system.
But that's probably more reference.
That's what, oh, that's more reference.
It has a huge fiction section.
They have a huge
And-
fiction.
And
I used
children's
it.
and young adult.
Yeah.
The young adult is small, but it's, you have it.
And I think one other thing is the amount of money that we would spend towards making it, let's say, a brand new library. We'd also have to think blank amount of money, how much of that, what else could we do with that money? Like, since there's lots of things that the village is wanting to accomplish. And so is this need of like a once a week library trip, or maybe 2 times a week, 3 times a week, is that worth it to you versus maybe having the roads in certain areas fixed, or having a certain, you know, I'm just saying, there's different things that we could do with that money versus, so like, let's say it's cheaper or more expensive doing it in the same library, or I don't know exactly how much it'd be cost to tear down some stuff, renovate, but I feel like it'd be good to also have like a budget, like once we get it down, it'd be nice to see this is what we're wanting to do if we don't do the library this way. What other things what benefits in other areas, maybe even besides the library, would we be getting?
So back on the space, how much space would be required? Would you need 2 rooms? 200 square foot of room? For quiet space and you know, everyone's talking about space. Because right now, it's just books out there. There are 2 rooms in the existing library, one on the left, one on the right, as I remember. There's the archives are in the back, and left halfway back to the archives are a bunch of desks, which I assume is the office space for the library personnel. So there's 2 rooms there, basically.
No, and then there's that room behind, there's another reading room. If you walk in the library,
There's
you
books
turn
in that
right.
room.
Well, when you turn right first, there's books, but when there's a room right behind that.
No, it's not the open. Oh, yes, there is. Yes,
No,
it's got a.
But it's more the reading room, but there's also, that's a lot of space also.
So conveniently, it's a census year. I think it's a relevant factor, right? Like that, we're a small town, but we're a growing town. And so I think if I'll just make a suggestion, I think this year's census results need to be taken into account. And I think the statistics are showing that Moore County is growing at pretty much an
The
exponential rate.
demographics are skewing heavily.
Right, I mean, in part due to the lack of zoning in this county, but that's not what this meeting's about. So, we keep adding homes, we keep adding families, and that's not slowing down. There's no sign that that's slowing down. And so, we're talking about our needs right now, but we do need to continue to look at what are the needs 10 years from now, what are the needs 15 years from now. I mean, when your kids are in high school, what's the plan? When your kids are in high school, what's the plan? And I think that's a relevant discussion point. I don't know, if I had 4 kids and my oldest was studying for the SATs, I'd probably want to find a house doing that, so that they could have that quiet space. And so my law school library, which is an unreasonable comparison, but we had a 1-to-1 student to study carrel ratio in the library. So every student your first year was assigned to study carrel, you got a lock for it, and that was your space to use. And good habits come from things like that. Having that quiet space, having a concentrated space with no distractions. It was pretty Wi-Fi. But, you don't have this sort of external stimuli, so you can really focus on what you're doing and develop those habits that get you through law school, get you through business school, get you through your career. And
As long as you take their phones away from them before they go in.
Right, well, we won't parent for them. But right, that's I think it's a relevant thing, and I think I don't know that kids today have an uninterrupted, quiet space to go to where they can isolate, right? In a good way. Not in a bad way, but where you can find that quiet space. So I think there's a need for that space as well as community collaborative space, which is a huge challenge. Maybe I can protect them, but finding the mix of the right thing. But I think both are hugely relevant.
Was listening to some of your comments, and they're very valid for the incoming generation. And the library you talk about is very similar to the library that I walked a mile to in Brooklyn. We've got a different community, and I think it needs to be addressed. The present library doesn't have a paved parking lot. And if you are going to increase the number of people in there per day, you need to put a parking lot, because you're not going to have grammar school students, maybe even high school students, walking from Pinewell, which is part of Pinehurst. You can't walk from one to the other.
Yeah.
Village Acres.
Yeah.
I don't know how old you want children across 211. So I think you have to really look at, where do we want this facility? Because the one in the middle of the village has no parking unless you use the retail parking space, and we know that argument. So you gotta think, where do you want it?
So where does this group want the facility? Where do you think it makes sense? We know Kathleen says right where it is, but what do others in the group think?
Little White comes to mind, behind the fire department, after the school moves out. It's centrally located, and that's off the top of my head.
At Rusty Wicker?
How you incorporate Pine Wild into walking to the library, I really don't see it.
Well, the same thing with the number 6 community, right? And 8 and 7 for that matter. It's a lot of
Very few
behind
people are going to be able to
Yeah,
walk.
to walk.
Yeah.
But sufficient parking is, I think, a big deal. I'm over in the Donald Ross neighborhood. We wouldn't walk. We'd probably golf cart over, and so golf cart parking would be nice. But yeah, sufficient parking is definitely an issue. I agree.
And it's not where all the students are.
Right.
The students are spread out more on the outskirts.
Well,
So I
I
think that-
like what you said about looking at the new census, because I looked up demographics of Pinehurst today, and 15% of our population is 18 or younger. That's not very much. So
But as she
I'm more
said, it's
concerned
wrong.
about us old folks, what we want at the library than the youngins, personally.
Oh,
So what do you guys think about that? Well, actually, before we leave that, does anyone else have ideas about where they think the library should go? Just if we're being totally, we're spitballing, we're brainstorming.
So I think that keeping a village center feel is important, right? And so I don't think anybody wants it on the, I don't know, I'm not gonna speak for anybody else. I don't wanna see it on the outskirts of town. And so I know there is a lot of space around here with the fire department and, other areas, kind of this rattlesnake trail area. If that's what works, that's what works. But I think keeping a relatively village-centric kind of concept, where, if you do have multiple kids and one's got an event at the community center, you can take the other to the library while one's at the community center, right? I mean, and they don't have to be right next door to each other, but within a few, minutes.
This is the village, you start decentralizing the village, it stops being a village, really. It just starts to being like community resources spread all over the place. This has a special ambiance to it because things are kind of close, sometimes too much for comfort, but it has a feel. And I think if you start moving these things out, it accommodates I think it'll lose that.
I don't know that if you take a modern library with all the things we want in it, we couldn't get it in that building with a shoehorn. I think, from what I understand, from here, there's enough different activities to go into the building. It's not going to fit. So I think you're looking at where else to put it. The community center was
That's tough.
4.9 mil.
Right.
You can get one hell of a library for less than that. I mean, especially if the village already owns the land.
How much of the land surrounding the library belongs to the library entity? Like, is there room to expand those facilities?
If you did away with the historic,
Pardon me?
if they did away with the historic,
Well,
they could
oh,
definitely.
right, but there's, the land around it is.
I don't know, do you guys know the answer to that question?
And there's the large wooded area behind the existing library.
Right.
They use that, people use that for parking.
But no, but it's
Park between the tree area.
It is, I mean, it's unused. I don't know the
totally
designation.
unused.
I think someone in the room does know about the space.
Yeah, it's on the map right there. It's
Is it
a
double?
small parcel.
If you build it up, if we put a grammar
I would
school
say-
boom,
Right around
So it's not, the available space that the library owns is maybe a third again, the size of what's
Probably
there.
a quarter of the size of
It's about 15 feet on each side.
15 feet on each side is what's currently owned.
But the village owns the land.
The rest of it.
The
I got that.
land.
There's a
So
lot of land.
the village could part with some of that land.
Oh,
I know.
Well, no, historical damage.
But we've heard people go through certain things, parking lot, bring books in through the intertransfer system. We want more books. We want a reading quiet area for X amount of people to be defined. How many kids are going to show up? We want an interactive spot where people can mix it up, okay? Which is not necessarily in the same spot as the quiet spot. It should be centrally located. It should have Wi-Fi, right? Well,
And where it is.
and the service, well, I said centrally located, let's put it that way. And you want longer service hours. And, but it still gets back to how many people are you gonna have that you would design for? He's gonna design something. If you go, I just want the same size as I got, how many people can you put in the building? Well, I can put 15. Well, wait a minute, that's too small because the community's growing. Okay, so how many spaces do you want? At some point, there has to be something there that says, we will plan for X amount. And that's going to give you your square footage requirement, and there's going to be square footage for books, and then you're going to have a computer location for probably storage and interaction, and it is a mathematical function that you go through. You say, this is how big I got to be to service what the folks in all these meetings want. And it kind of boils down to that. And if you can't get it here and they don't let you do it there, you gotta find it someplace else. And I don't know whether we can pick where those are.
And you have to park the cars.
I said,
Well, he
in
said
parking
parking.
lot. But those are
That's
the
going to
basic
take up
things.
more room than the library.
I would agree. And you said, well, there's plenty of room to park, but I forgot about the thing about retail. Because you go fill it up when people go to the library and the retail people aren't like that.
So that was actually a quite good summary. And the goal out of this is at the end of this study, what they will be able to do is kind of define a range of volumes that you would expect to have for a community of this scale based on your goals. We will start to assign some space values to the quiet space, to the interactive space, to the support spaces, and to the stacks, and anything else that comes up, and start to arrive at a square footage range. Then we can circle back and say, hey, does it work on this site? Does it not work on this site? If it's more important to the community to remain on this site, are they willing to give up these programs? Or do we look at other options in off-site? I'm hearing very loud and clear that it still wants to be central to the village, which is great. And I think that's kind of this big, messy sausage-making exercise that we all need to go through based on your data and your feedback. And your feedback's been great. You hit most of the high points of what we typically see in libraries. The one other one I might throw out there just as a question for the group without advocating, a lot of times now we'll start to see tiered or stepped spaces that function kind of as interactive spaces, informal meeting spaces, but also double up if you have somebody who wants to come in and play a guitar, or a child that wants to have a recital, or if you want to bring in an author in for a book signing that gives a talk on their book. Is there any interest in that, and or for any of those that have come from other communities, have you seen spaces like that?
So can I ask a question? Because I wish I had more time to spend in the village. Is there a small bookstore anywhere in town? That would already.
But it's youth books.
Okay.
It's right
I was
next
gonna
to
say,
it.
'cause I wouldn't want to take away, if a bookstore was already doing those things, I wouldn't want to take away from their function, but if they're not, I mean, I think that's great.
We don't really do anything like that, yeah. And they share space with the roast office, so the coffee shop draws in a lot of people.
A lot of people. You're right.
Let me ask you, when you build something, when you figure you're gonna build so many square feet, or you use some of these parameters, and you tell how many parking spaces need to make this thing function? Is that something that you do with your slide rule? Oh, slide rule.
That makes me laugh.
So for something like parking, your community will have zoning requirements that outline a minimum amount of parking typically that's required. Sometimes that is adequate, sometimes depending on your user group, you might want extra parking. So we'll just kind of, again, do some analysis based on what the zoning requires, but also look at who we think the users are and how we expect most of them to arrive at the library. If there are a lot of drivers, if there is a higher senior percentage, which we may well have here, then you tend to want to have extra parking spaces.
The Disabilities Act now is going to have to be met depending on your funding, so that's going to create an issue that you have to deal with.
Do you provide a head count and a possible annual cost of running the library? I don't know.
We can do some general numbers related to that, so,
Can or do?
well, both.
You will, okay.
So for a library of X number of square feet, it would cost X approximately to run every year. You know, there's some variation, but yeah, we have benchmarks that we use.
Would you also provide an approximate, if one of the options was a build, do you provide a rule of thumb what a build cost would be?
Yes. We anticipate that we'll create a square footage range based on the program uses that we're hearing from the community. And with that, we'll assign a budget range, whether it's a new build, whether it's a renovation of an existing building, whether it's a renovation and an addition to an existing building. We're going to try to do some rough order of magnitudes for all of that, so everyone will be able to compare.
So if we're like really planning Willy Wonka, get whatever you want, right? And space isn't an issue, and money's not an issue, and all those things are issues. And let's just suspend reality for a minute here. I think, so one of the other, I think, cool things in some libraries I've been to as a kid, as an adult, are kind of the hands-on experiential learning aspects. And I'll show my age here, I remember wearing headphones in the library, like big headphones, and like reading along with books and things like that, and having like kind of different options and all sorts of things. But I think one of the cool things about North Carolina that I like about North Carolina is the use of outdoor space as well as a learning space. And so like a small community garden with native plants and like little things that told you what those native plants were and their little Latin names and all that stuff that you could kind of walk through and take a child and teach them about things that are native to North Carolina and pollinators and the importance of that and the food cycle. I think all of that is like hugely understudied. And there's not time or the space for that in elementary schools to teach. And so I think having like a little community garden space, even if it was volunteer run, would be really cool. And it would kind of also give it that community feel and less of a stark building feel because you have that sort of green space with it. So
Let me
that's
put
just
one
a-
more bee in your bonnet.
Absolutely.
I have, going to have to leave pretty quick.
See, these are the things you don't know if you get all
The good burgers of Moore County have always had a propensity to do things on the cheap.
It's not near the light.
If you would know, you probably don't have any idea, we're building some new schools finally. Up until, right at the moment, I may be lying about this, but I think somebody told me that there are 50 house trailers around the county that are part of the school system.
Okay.
They build us, you have to take that in consideration. They may not want to, the village of Pinehurst or whoever you're going to be dealing with, they may not want to look anywhere down the road than right past the end of their nose. But they have to, you need to consider that because they won't.
Do you support considering it?
They don't, why would we have 50 house trailers? That's always just astounded me. I mean, I don't have any kids. I have grandkids. You're a junior? Pinecrest?
I'm homeschooled.
Where?
Homeschooled, yeah.
Okay. But I have it, my youngest now is a junior at Pinecrest. But I've been looking out at West Pine, what are they doing? Why, they built the school 10 years ago and already they've got 3 or 4 house trailers.
But that's not just here, it's all over. Like Charlotte, I have grandchildren in Charlotte, they build the schools and they also build outdoor classrooms because they don't have enough space. So it's not just here.
Okay, so it's not just here, but it is here and that's something you have to consider.
Absolutely.
You wanted other things to be considered, other perhaps meeting spaces, piano recitals, I think you referred.
Questions?
Yeah, just a question. I think I would look to areas that are already in the community on some of these things that already could perhaps provide that space for someone. Because I played piano as a child, memorable moments. But I mean, churches and things like that, but some of these other activities which are important to the community may be able to be supplied by existing areas that are already here, as opposed to, requiring additional space for things like that. But it would be good to list those items that you're looking for and then go back and say, is there spaces where people can get at that for a reasonable cost? But I don't see, not knowing what that list is, I don't see that showing up necessarily in this library activity, me personally.
So I'll just add, I would just voice my support for a multi-purpose room, at least one multi-purpose room in a library facility. And a lot of times the primary programming that ends up happening in those is the story time, children's story time. And to have a set-aside room for that is really awesome. It really expands the opportunities that the librarians have when they have that set-aside space where they can set out crafts and they can do games and the kids can be up and they can be laughing and dancing. They can play music and it's not disturbing people in other parts of the building. But then that room then is available for non-story time hours for community meetings, HOA meetings, whatever else it may be used for, small concerts and so on. But I think it's a super valuable space to have in the library.
And one other thing is, I was wondering, is there any other way that we can get any more height on the library? I wasn't sure if there's any, like, how
Or
high
second
the
floor.
ceilings are.
For second floor.
Or not even necessarily a second floor, it's like, you know, if you had shelves up higher and there was a way to like
Yeah.
grab a book. So if you had like all the books organized and you had like a computer that told you, you know, it's over there, so then you could ask someone to, here, I'm looking for this book. And I was just wondering if there's any way that we can get necessarily, maybe it's not like book level, you know, but it would have like a detailed grid of where things would be located so you could make sure that you could find your book there necessarily. I was just wondering if there's any way that like, maybe we don't have enough like carved in square feet, like.
So try to create
space,
more
height.
volume storage in the bulk of available.
In your analysis, do you come back with a per capita cost for doing the different operations you have? And do you suggest whether it's centrally paid for by the municipality, or is there a library fee?
Good question.
So we will look at different funding models that.
I think a lot of that would be interesting to the community on how it's going to be paid for.
And summarily ignored by the village, but it would be interesting, I agree. It would be nice to see.
What are you agreeing to?
That it would be nice to see the funding models. I'm not sure the village will listen, right, to what anybody's preferences are.
We do vote.
We do vote, we do vote.
Well, we're definitely here, you know, that really is the whole point of this project is to listen and find out what people want. So when it comes to library, thank you so much. Thank you for.
So how do you determine the size of the spaces other than the book space? The book space is defined on here. I want 20,000 volumes, I need this much space. Okay, so that's a quantity that is probably very easy to determine. So how do you determine a quiet study place / computer room? Could be the same, but you're supposed to be quiet, you're on a computer. And you have a meeting room, which for general meetings and discussions, and potentially a third room for something else, whatever you want to do with a third room, if you think you need 3 rooms. So how do you determine the size of these rooms and how many people will be using them? I mean, story time could be 2 people or 30 people, depending. 30 people is going to require a lot more space than 2.
It's a good question. So, I mean, typically what we would end up doing is looking at your current population, look at the projected population. You typically plan ahead for some number of years of growth because you don't want to build a library and have it obsolete the day that it opens. And then with that, we will, you know, there are metrics for number of people that you might expect as a utilization rate based on your population. That we would then assign.
It is a population / demographic. You have to look at demographics too.
Well, do you use demographics when you do it by population? Because the median age for Pinehurst is 60.
Yeah.
Right, so.
What was it 5 years
Some
ago?
of this, but
What was it 5 years ago? 10 years ago? I like to
It
see
was
how
probably higher.
let's see how fast it's
Higher,
doing. Because when they do
probably.
these projections, they're going to be projecting off of like what demographics. So that's something.
It's
He's
actually-
a very confident
yeah,
individual. We'll take that
it's
into consideration.
we'll look at the trend lines for that. I mean, basically, it's the population demographics with how your total population has grown and how the demographics, if the demographics within that population.
Pinehurst has been caught in that trap in the past. It didn't anticipate a younger generation moving in, and
Please, I used to live in Charlotte. It was no better at all.
Well, it's the current school.
At all.
I mean,
doesn't mean we can't look at it.
I know, they should look at
They've
it.
unrested
And it's tough. You know, I
They're
think
building
it's,
schools, they're
I don't
already
envy any
maxed out.
municipal leaders having to do their job because the challenge is we all have needs and wants. And I think more often than not, the leaders understand where things are going and where the real needs lie. But the available funds often just don't line up.
Just aren't
Yeah,
there it is.
that's right.
Yeah.
So we're at time.
Yeah.
So thank you again. There is a survey online, so please take it and encourage your neighbors, friends, and family to take it because this is their opportunity to give that feedback.
Now, that's not what we did on the wall.
No.
No, but this is
No, that was just
different.
an activity that was taken into consideration.
Will we get anything back from you all based on attending any of this or that, or?
June, right? Your plan?
Right. So, no, will you personally get a copy of that via email? No.
No, okay.
But we will present it to council, and then council will decide how they want to share it out to the.
Okay. Orlando.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You did a great job summarizing that. I was impressed. Thank you so much.